I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tina Kotek has come through her first legislative session as Oregon's governor with, I think I could say, and you would probably say too, flying colors. She got most of what she wanted. But you know what? Having a majority in both the House and the Senate as your party, well, it does not guarantee easy passage of everything. And one of her biggest priorities bombed, went down hard at the last minute, killed by members of her own party. And that is our big story tonight. The bill killed involved housing. Now, when it comes to the housing crisis here, one solution is clear. We do need more places where people can live. So, okay, that's not so hard. Just build more, right? Simple. It turns out not so much. There's a lot to think about when you're adding housing to cities. It's not just a matter of the buildings themselves. It's the roads and sidewalks and electricity and all of the other infrastructure that goes into a neighborhood. And maybe most important, the land where you can put it all. That's where lawmakers got hung up at the very end of the legislative session last week. They were working on a bill championed by Governor Kotek, part of her big push to add 36,000 housing units a year. It's House Bill 3414. It would have allowed adjustments to local building codes in order to get housing developments built faster. It basically would cut some red tape. It also would set up a new statewide office, a Housing Accountability Production Office. That was aimed at making sure the cities did work with developers to get that housing built. And the bill would allow cities to quickly expand their urban growth boundaries by up to 150 acres. The bill went through many changes and amendments as the session was wrapping up. And in the end, it had bipartisan support. But then it failed the Senate by a single vote. Republicans who showed up, they actually teamed up with some of the Democrats to vote for the bill. But a group of Democrats split off and had the numbers to kill it. Here's how Governor Kotek responded yesterday.
One of the pieces of the agreement for Senate Republicans and independents to come back was to make a good faith effort to pass 3414 with the land supply portion. I made a commitment personally to be part of trying to pass it. So I worked in the last 72 hours to talk to members to try to get their votes. And on the day of the floor, I thought we would pass the bill. We didn't. That happens. That doesn't mean we aren't coming back on the topic. So I upheld my side of the bargain, which was to try to get it done. And we need to continue the conversation.
Kotek says that in order to address the housing crisis, the status quo is not working. Things need to be done differently. For instance, cities can already apply to expand their urban growth boundary, but it's a real pain. Takes forever. This bill would have made that quicker. We talked to Home Forward, which used to be the Portland Housing Authority. They build housing throughout the Portland area, and they supported the bill. They say local building codes have slowed them down.
So there's one specific development that we've been working on for 3+ years that ended up costing significantly more money and taking significantly longer than we anticipated due to the denial of very reasonable adjustment requests to the local jurisdiction's land use requirements. But really the real cost here is that homeless folks and renters at risk of homelessness were denied access to this housing for over 1.5 years in this specific example that would have been avoided if a law like House Bill 3414 had been in place. We were asking for adjustments around things like the size of the windows, right? We wanted to allow larger windows than what was under local code to allow our residents to have more light in their units. We wanted to minimize the number of parking spaces because the size of the units that were being built did not require, the local code's unit to parking space ratio. When you have a studio apartment, you're probably going to not need, multiple cars. So those were the type of adjustments that we were requesting. When they were denied, we have to go through a whole redesign process that involves pretty extensive community engagement and input. And that just adds, cost, process, that all ends up taking a significant amount more time.
But leaders from several cities opposed House Bill 3414. They say they're not getting enough support from the state, probably not enough money when it comes to putting that infrastructure into place. One group we talked with is the League of Oregon Cities. That's as an organization, they were officially neutral on the bill, but they represent hundreds of cities across the state, and they say local governments are facing big barriers when it comes to trying to figure out how to add that housing.
We have a number of infrastructure systems that need updating, need improving. There are new updated federal and state requirements for stormwater management, environmental impacts. There are new directions and new policies that see support coming down from the state legislature and the executive branch, encouraging more walkable, bikeable communities, more increased investment in transit. All of this is very expensive, and we need increased partnership from the state to make it happen. There are also cities who do lack available land. Not every city is in that position. Not every city has physically room to grow based on their geography. A number of communities are also experiencing site constraints, whether that be floodplains or wetlands mitigation, which can be really costly and kind of slow down development, whether that's the terrain, very steep slopes that make it really costly or difficult to build housing. Our communities on the coast are, having to manage what it looks like to produce additional housing and serve their communities in tsunami inundation zones. So there's a wide range of barriers across the state. Infrastructure and capacity are at the top across the board for all cities.
So, okay, there is a lot there. The league says state leaders should listen to local government folks when the legislation like this comes back, and some lawmakers have said it will return during next year's short session. We'll certainly keep you posted on that. When Governor Tina Kotek ordered a pause on highway tolling, she ordered it to be paused back in May and have it last until 2026. Well, when she said that, many drivers, in fact, many of you viewers, were thrilled. But the decision does carry impacts, and now we know what they are. The Department of Transportation says without the tolling money, they're going to have to cut back on some of the planned projects. First, let's get one thing out of the way. The Interstate Bridge project, not impacted. The funding for that comes from the Oregon legislature, also from Washington's legislature, and from the feds, we all hope, and later in the process, tolls. But let's stick to our topic. What projects will be put on hold in Oregon? Right now, ODOT is working on adding a third lane in each direction to the Abernethy Bridge on I-205 near Oregon City. ODOT is also making the bridge stronger so that it will survive a major earthquake. That's called Phase 1, and it's not going to be affected by the tolling pause. But it would have tolls that are, I shouldn't say but, and it will have tolls on the Abernethy Bridge to help pay for that construction in 2026. Here's the but Phase 2 would be put on hold. That would add a lane in each direction along a 7-mile stretch west of the Abernethy Bridge. It would also include seismic upgrades or replacements of 9 other bridges along that corridor, including the Tualatin Bridge. The Department of Transportation says without those tolls starting sooner, it might run out of money, and that's why it needs to change or stop some of the construction schedules. It blames the changing scope of some projects and construction price inflation. For example, back in 2017, when the plan was to widen Interstate 5 at the Rose Quarter and it was approved, well, the estimated cost then was like $450 million. Now the plan there is not only to widen the interstate, but also to provide a freeway cap over the top that's thick enough to hold big buildings. And the cost is now estimated at $1.5 billion to $1.9 billion. So yeah, the price tag has grown significantly. They're also spending another $40 million for more design work there. But without tolling, ODOT plans to put a pause on the I-5 Rose Quarter project. Work would also stop on the Bruin Bridge. However, the plan to place tolls along several parts of I-5 and 205 in the greater metro area, well, that would go forward beginning in 2026. The assumption is that the tolls will be in place and generate the money needed to pay for the tolling infrastructure. The goal of the tolls there is to cut down on traffic jams and to use them for funding. The cost of getting, by the way, the back end of the tolling program up and running for the greater metro area, I was surprised when I saw this number. I don't know what you'll think, but let me know. $114 million. Yesterday, ODOT presented its new plan to the State Transportation Commission. They agreed the recommendations forwarded to the documents to the Governor, Tina Kotek, for final approval. Near the end of the meeting, the board chair, Julie Brown, the general manager of the Rogue Valley Transportation District in Southern Oregon, said, hey, nobody's going to be happy with the plan.
Everyone is frustrated, and there are going to be people who are continually frustrated as we leave this meeting because they don't like the decision that was made by the commission. But we're doing the best that we can. It's a very difficult decision.
One of the commission members is Lee Byer. He's a former lawmaker who ran the committee that originally approved many of these projects way back in 2017. He spoke up for rural Oregon and said it's important that ODOT not take money from other parts of the state to cover the metro.
We got to keep in mind that we're responsible for statewide transportation, and in order to keep political balance, we have to make sure that we don't neglect the other 90% of the state as we move forward on this. We have a lot of projects that are in the STIP that are important. They're just as important to those communities as these projects are important to the metro area.
So STIP means Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. Governor Kotek ordered the pause on tolling this past May. Under her order, it can begin January 1st, 2026. So what do you think about all this? Are the delays prudent? Do you think maybe they're just a scare tactic being used by ODOT? Maybe something else? Let us know what you think, will you? Our email is thestory@kgw.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, our investigations into ambulance response times continue. This time, we're heading north of the Columbia River to Clark County, Washington. American Medical Response runs the ambulance services there. So how does it stack up in their less than ideal performance here in Multnomah County? Evan Watson joins us to explain when The Story returns. If you're a fan of The Story, and I mean, we sure hope you are, You're aware of our reporting on the ambulance company American Medical Response and their struggles in Multnomah County. We've reported how AMR crews were unable to immediately respond to over 6,000 911 calls in just the last 6 months. It's what's called level 0. Someone calls 911 and no ambulances are available to send their way. But it turns out this is not just a problem here. Investigative reporter Evan Watson spent the day in Clark County, which also uses AMR for ambulance services.
If there's one thing that you believe when you call 911, it's that someone will come to help.
Save more lives.
But hundreds of times each year, a dispatcher answers and realizes they don't have an ambulance
AMR is level 0
that they can send.
Happy we're currently level 0. We'll get someone started as soon as they're available.
In Clark County, dispatch has recorded 857 of these level 0 incidents so far this year. These are 911 calls for seizures, overdoses, strokes, and heart problems. Time-sensitive emergencies. Now, it's important to recognize scale here. This stack shows the 857 level 0 calls in Clark County since January. But dispatchers have received 25,000 calls in total this year. So level 0 incidents only represent about 3% of 911 calls. But still, that's more than 850 times when someone called 911 and AMR didn't have an ambulance crew available to send, which most people admit is too often.
I would say over the last couple of years, the rate of level 0 has definitely had an uptick.
Firefighters respond to 911 calls too.
All right, hold.
But when AMR is at level 0, they're often left waiting.
We start treating a patient and then we have to wait for an ambulance to arrive to transport. And sometimes we've had wait times up to 45 minutes.
Clark County District 6 Fire Chief Kristen Maurer says it's frustrating. Firefighters can get discouraged and their trucks aren't built to transport.
There's longer hospital wait times because hospitals are having a hard time staffing. So the ambulances get hung up at the hospitals. Then on the flip side, the ambulances are also having a hard time hiring paramedics.
She lists another big problem: when people call 911 for non-emergencies, or they call multiple times.
Like around here, people call 911 just for the stupid things like the skateboarders.
AMR's service in Clark County is better than others. In Multnomah County, AMR has been at level 0 on about 10% of 911 calls so far this year, compared to about 3% in Clark County. Denise Timmons lives in Vancouver. She says she can get angry when AMR ambulances are late to respond.
When I had my stroke and aneurysms on my brain, my doctor told me if I was a few minutes later, I would have died.
But she says paramedics and EMTs need grace too.
You got to stop and understand there's other people that need help at that time. That's why people don't keep that in mind. You know, there's only so many ambulances, so many fire trucks that can respond.
First responders in Clark County recently started tiering 911 calls with a new program called Nurse Navigation, and they've added basic life support units for lower acuity calls. Maurer says little bites like these changes can help.
We need more paramedics, and we need more paramedics to staff more ambulances. But that will only fix part of the problem. We'll also need more nurses and hospital staff and hospital beds to get those patients off the ambulance so the ambulance can go back into service.
I'm here with Evan now, and is the reason that they get these level 0s the same reason we're seeing in Multnomah County?
Well, AMR works in both places, right? In Multnomah County, they've blamed the issues on the 2 paramedic system in Multnomah County, saying that the paramedic shortage makes it difficult for them to staff the ambulances. That's not the case in Clark County. It's a 1-in-1 paramedic and EMT, so AMR can't say, hey, that's the problem here. It could be an increase in call volume. It could be staffing shortages at the hospital or the paramedic and EMT side, or a combination of all these factors, something more to look into. Interestingly, AMR declined to interview with me on this subject again. So the fire departments here are left to innovate this. And just today, actually, the Clark Cowlitz Fire Rescue received an ambulance that fire department paramedics will operate. The Cowlitz Indian tribe gifted the fire department this $800,000 in November for 2 ambulances. A voter passed a tax levy means the department has hired 25 new emergency responders, including 6 paramedics, to work this ambulance and another. You can see it still needs the paint job on there. The concept is when AMR is at level 0 delayed or when ambulances are all concentrated elsewhere, Clark Cowlitz Fire Rescue can respond to medical calls and transport when needed. It's not the first plan of action, but shows fire departments thinking proactively at trying to make up for AMR's shortcomings here, showing that, this has been an issue for a while now. This has been in the works, people noticing this for years, but as you heard in that story just moments ago, an increase in level 0 calls from the fire department's perspective and an increasing problem around our whole region.
Yeah, well, innovative solution. Thanks for that, Evan. Appreciate it. Good stuff. Still to come on the story, we continue to follow Portland's daytime camping ban and the enforcement or lack thereof that could be on the way. We'll share some of your thoughts on the Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt's explanation of what his office plans to do when this story returns.
Next at 6:30, several people are hurt when a pickup truck crashes into a clinic in Newburgh. Plus, how Fred Meyer is ramping up its efforts to fight shoplifting at stores in Portland. And a behind-the-scenes look at the effort to repair the Spirit Lake Highway to Mount St. Helens when folks who had to leave their cars behind up top might finally get them back. Plus, Matt's 7 Day at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
If you missed our live interview with U.S. Senator Ron Wyden from yesterday's show, be sure to check it out on the KGW YouTube channel. Our other big story yesterday focused on Portland's upcoming daytime camping ban. Like many of you, we wonder about enforcement. We've seen how Measure 110's lack of consequences has gone so far. Poorly, I guess would be a nice way to describe it. So will this camping ban be different? Based on what Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt told us this week, we are not holding our breath. Schmidt says that realistically, he does not see jail being used as an enforcement option. Commissioner Renee Gonzalez said something similar shortly after the ban passed City Council earlier this month. Schmidt also said fining homeless people feels pointless. The idea behind this ban and for so many other policies in recent years is to simply connect homeless people to services, which does sound great, but putting that into practice, well, that's a whole different ballgame. I already gave you my opinion on all this. You can catch that on our YouTube channel as well, but we asked you for your thoughts. Mary wrote in to let us know no consequences means a continuation of homeless irresponsibility. We're all sick of it. And Michael chimed in as well. How come our clueless politicians don't understand that if there are not consequences for the homeless breaking laws, they will continue to break the law? Demonstrated again and again and again, and these bleeding heart progressives don't get it. It has ruined Portland. Nina took a different approach, telling us, I believe this law is just a tool to be able to force these people to move. The law is obviously imperfect, as they will simply move from one place to another. To what end? If they get tired of moving, they will finally be motivated to change their behavior. It's always tiny steps, and this is worth trying. And we'll end tonight with a voicemail from a viewer named Rich, who we sort of think summed up a lot of your feelings about the roller coaster of homeless policies around Portland.
I keep hoping for some sort of silver lining when I go down to Portland. I keep hoping for some sort of leadership from Multnomah County or from the city or from somebody, and I keep seeing these things like the camping ban, that there will be absolutely no consequences if you do camp. All of these things, I keep seeing them, I read about them in the Oregonian, and I'm thinking, wow, somebody's making progress. And then I hear Mike Schmidt or Ted Wheeler say, oh, well, that's really not going to happen. And, man, it's just so discouraging.
Well, hang in there, Rich. I feel you. I feel that sometimes too, but I'm convinced we're going to turn this city around. Things are getting better, a little bit better every day, I think. That's what I keep saying. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.